Do you remember where you were when you watched the first moon landing or when the Berlin Wall fell? Well, if you're an accountant, you definitely remember where you were when you learned that Enron had collapsed and Arthur Andersen, the largest public accounting firm in the country, had fallen apart too. In my dissertation, I studied the effects of a law passed by Congress in response to a number of accounting scandals, including Enron and MCI WorldCom, two of the largest fraud-related bankruptcies in history. Among the many mandates of this law is one which requires the SEC, now that's the Securities and Exchange Commission to be exact, not the football conference, to perform a regular and in-depth review of the financial information of public companies. The goal of these reviews is to protect investors by ensuring that they have accurate and complete financial information. Retail companies like Walmart and Amazon have billions of dollars worth of inventory, often the single largest asset in their possession. In reading hundreds of SEC comments related to inventory accounting over the past year, I have identified an anomaly whereby I believe that some firms may be using an inappropriate accounting practice to manipulate their reported earnings, a practice we call earnings management. Now, accounting rules say that if your inventory declines in value for any reason, you have to write it down to reflect that it isn't worth as much as you first thought. For example, let's say that this picture above represents Walmart's stockpile of the iPhone 6, but now that the new model has been released, they can't sell those old phones for as much as they first thought. But instead of taking the write-down like the rules say, we see that some firms are using a special account to avoid it. Now, this practice is potentially very dangerous to shareholders and the market as a whole. Stock prices change based on a number of factors, one of which is the reported earnings of the firm. If the earnings are inflated, the stock may trade at a much higher price than is appropriate. But when the true earnings come out months or even years later, the stock price can plummet, leaving many people without the money they need to retire or send their kids to college. Now, sometimes the SEC tells companies that the practice I've identified is not allowed, which is exactly what I would expect. You're breaking the rules, and the government tells you to stop. But other times, the Commission appears to pass over this practice without requiring change. Why is that? If the rules are the same for everyone, which they are, then why aren't they applied equally? My goal in addressing these questions is to assess the effectiveness of the comment letter process in curbing earnings management so that people like you can feel confident when investing your hard-earned money. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
My name is Jordan Rippy. I'm a PhD student in accounting. My dissertation research has to do with whether or not the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, does a good job of reviewing the filings of public companies and helping them follow the rules more appropriately so that stockholders can feel more confident in their investments. So my dad grew up in a lot of chaos, a lot of poverty. He was raised by his sister and her husband. And so he ultimately went to ROTC and got a degree in accounting and practiced public accounting for a number of years. And so I got into accounting because of his story. So he had the opportunity to get a professional job, to get a stable job, to make a living, to provide for what would become his family. So my work really has two distinct parts. First is doing research and second is teaching. So in my research, I spend a lot of time reading, a lot of rulemaking, a lot of legislation, a lot of sort of lawyer lingo. I spend a lot of time reading those things and then applying that to some numbers. So I definitely crunch numbers just like you would think an accountant does, but that's not all I do in my research. I definitely do a lot of reading. But then in my teaching, I spend a lot of time preparing to teach students because I think that's a really important part of our job. We're at a university where we have thousands of undergraduate students that need to be educated, and I had 200 students sitting in my class this past semester, and I want to make sure that those students get what they paid for. They came to get an education in my particular discipline, and I want to make sure that they get that thing. But we can prepare students to help them launch out into something that can be successful for them and really change the trajectory of their life and of their family's life.